Welcome to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. I'm Bernie Flowers, one of Uncle Sam's wayward sons. I intend to talk about important topics every week in hopes of helping to improve our country and our way of life. I ask that you like, share, and subscribe as we try to grow the channel and defend America's middle class. So, let's get started. Thaddeus C. Cleveland is the sheriff for Terrell County, Texas. He was appointed sheriff on May 17th, 2022, and elected sheriff in November of 2022. Prior to his appointment, Sheriff Cleveland spent over 26 years in the United States Border Patrol. And the last 11 years of his career, he was the patrol agent in charge of the Sanderson Border Patrol Station in Texas. So, without any further ado, Sheriff, how you doing today?
Hey, Bernie, thank you for having me. And I'll tell you what, I'm doing good. Couldn't be any better.
Man, you're protecting the world. You're protecting America. I can't be more proud of you.
Well, thank you for that. Like we've discussed in the past, I'm blessed, man. And I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I mean that.
Wow. You and I met on Newsmax. We were guests a couple of months ago, and we just kind of hit it off and kept in touch with each other. And I'm so thankful that you agreed to come onto the program, because my audience, they're interested in the border, and you are the most authentic, knowledgeable person on the border that I know. And so I just am happy that you're taking the time to be out here. And again, we got a lot in common. You got a unique perspective on the border. And rather than listening to me, let's get on with asking you some questions so people know what's going on down there. You ready to go?
Hey, I am. But before you start, and when you mentioned that Newsmax, something I'd forgotten about, and it just piqued in my mind was, when we did that panel interview, your answers, your responses to some of those questions really blew me away. Of course, I've lived an entire lifetime on the border and a career in the Border Patrol, but just your knowledge that you had about the border really impressed me. And that doesn't just come from someone picking up from somebody else. I mean, it was genuine, and really, I think that's what kind of, I know I emailed you back and reached out to the producer and said, hey, put me in contact with this guy, because I was really impressed. So thank you for doing what you do through this podcast and other interviews and whatnot.
Well, I'll tell you, brother, if we don't protect our country, who will?
That's it.
Bottom line. So let me ask you first, how did you get into the law enforcement business?
Yeah, so, since about the first grade, I remember I took some sort of little, aptitude test or something where we filled in little circles with a pencil, and it came back and said, your career's going to be a public servant. And I had a cousin whose grandfather, and I called him granddad, even though he wasn't by blood my granddad, but he was the sheriff out here in Terrell County as well. And Terrell County is on the U.S.-Mexico border. We are the 10th largest we are the 10th largest county in the state of Texas, and we have 54 miles of river of international boundary with Mexico.
Wow.
But again, this is a Border Patrol community. We have a Border Patrol station here, so I grew up around Border Patrol agents. Of course, my cousin's grandfather being a sheriff, and I just had it in me. I knew that law enforcement was what I was going to be in. And, I graduated high school. I went to a semester of college in a neighboring community in Alpine, Texas, and started in a criminal justice career field or a study plan. But, I needed a car. And I say that jokingly, but also, I had two grandfathers that served in the United States Air Force, and I knew serving was going to be something that was going to be in my future. And enlisting in the United States Air Force, went into be security police, which you're very familiar with your Air Force career. But God had a different plan. When I got the basic training, of course, the recruiter said, security police and Air Force, dime a dozen. We have lots of jets to guard. But at basic, they said, no, these are the jobs you can apply for, and they were all medical. I chose one, and great career field. My roommate at tech school, Michael Yaki, ended up being head of Indian Health Services. He was full-blooded Zuni Indian. President Trump had appointed him in that position under Health and Human Services. Again, another one of those, God-inspired things. But my career field ended up being overmanned, and they weren't pushing us out. But I had tested for the United States Border Patrol and passed it. And that was during the Clinton presidency, and they were starting to add more agents along the border. And, I ended up going Palace Chase out of the United States Air Force right into the Border Patrol. I was sitting out to Nogales, Arizona, which was at that time ground zero for the border.
Right.
And 26 years later, a lot of different interventions by God, or a lot of different things being established and set up. But our sheriff passed away. And he was also a 30-year veteran of the United States Border Patrol. His name was Santiago Gonzalez Jr. He had actually started his career here in Sanderson when I was still in high school. But he retired after 30 years, became our sheriff. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack at the age of 55, and he didn't make it. So at that point, I knew it was time for me to take care of my community that had taken care of me growing up and still be able to support the U.S. Border Patrol. And to be honest, I think I can support them more from here in this position as the sheriff than I could as the patrol agent in charge. But I have to mention, when I say take care of this community, so I was raised by my grandmother here. Parents pregnant at 16, had me at 17, into drugs and alcohol, and ended up divorced. But the family pulled me from that situation to live with my grandmother. And so many families in this community, Bernie, were like parents. They treated me as if I was their own. I like to say I was better off than most kids with two parents. But in a quick, long nutshell, that's how I got started in this career field.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Nogales. I did a tour in Arizona years ago, and we used to go down to Nogales all the time back in the early 90s when I first got married. And there's another place that's near and dear to my heart, and another touch point where you and I have some history, ate some of the same dirt, as they say. You know what I mean?
I hear.
There you go. We got another question for you. From your perspective, how has the federal government's immigration policy affected Texas and especially your county?
Man, Bernie, that's a great question. And really, let me frame it up with, so when I first started in the U.S. Border Patrol, I started under as I mentioned, President Clinton's administration. And I worked from President Clinton to President Bush to President Obama to President Trump, and then a year and some change of this current administration. And what I'll tell you is those first four administrations, regardless if they were Republican or Democrat, they worked in a bipartisan fashion. And really, the border should be a nonpartisan. It should be we're all working together. But they furthered border security. They all added more manpower. They all added border fencing, barriers, what we call as infrastructure, and they all added technology. Yes, some more than others, but all four, again, lent to a more safe and secure border. This current administration, and I like to frame it up like that because this current administration has completely dismantled all of those prior four administrations' work and labor along the U.S.-Mexico border. It's no longer it's no longer the U.S.-Mexico border; it's the U.S. world border. Every country in the world exploits the U.S.-Mexico border to make their illegal entry in the United States, and then they're not staying here along the border. They're going to every state, every city throughout the United States.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And wow, I, could tell you some stories about my experience, but this program is about you. So I got another question for you.
Yes, sir.
My sources tell me that a full 1/3 of the cameras on the border are inoperative right now. Is this true?
So, and I've heard some of the same, and I've read some of the same in the media, and some of those people that are speaking it from the union side, they wouldn't be telling a fabricated story. They're out there preaching the facts, and they're doing it because of, again, that complete dismantling of the border. If you go out, in addition to that, if you go out to Arizona, there is fence stacked along the all-weather roads that have been built along the border, just rusting.
Wow.
There's light fixtures that have been built in with the fence, because it's not just a border barrier. That they build in other infrastructure with it, such as lighting. They put technology on it, such as cameras. So it's not just a fence; it's a complete package when they build fencing. There's miles and miles of it just laying on the ground. There's lights that they never turned the power onto. They're ready to go, and that was completely done from the prior administration to this new administration, where they shut that off. But one point I wanted to touch on that previous question that I didn't mention is that, look, when I first started my career, we were part of the Department of Justice. We were under the Immigration and Naturalization Service. After 9/11, the U.S. Border Patrol was pulled out of the Department of Justice and plugged into the Department of Homeland Security. immigration was no longer our job, if you will. We became, in all threats, we became a national security asset. And I can tell you that border security does equal national security. And it's two different issues we're facing, whether it's border security is one, immigration is another. Those are two separate issues, and we need to keep them separate. We must secure our borders. We got to keep bad people and bad things out. Immigration, and I just spoke yesterday in an interview where they talked about, Kamala's interview saying that our immigration system's broken. The immigration system isn't broken. Could it be worked on? Most certainly. But if we were to enforce those laws on the books, we would be fine. But border security, immigration, again, two separate issues. We have to keep them separate. And right now, they're really trying to mix the two. And the big thing I want is Americans to know that border security isn't immigration, and immigration isn't border security.
There you go. Well, Sheriff, what tools do you have at your disposal to protect Americans and Texans from illegal immigration?
So I'll tell you what, Bernie, if it wasn't for Governor Abbott and Operation Lone Star, we wouldn't have anything. So again, we live in the 10th largest county in the state of Texas with only a population of 700 people. So we don't have a lot of revenue. We've got a lot of country, but not a lot of revenue. And we're a very poor county. But what Governor Abbott has done for all the border counties, and then some of the counties just above the border counties through Operation Lone Star, has provided grants, provided personnel that have come in, whether it's been Texas Department of Public Safety, Highway Patrol troopers, Parks and Wildlife, game wardens. Both of those are law enforcement. And then we have Texas Military Department deployed to the border that are assisting us. And I've got them right here in my county. And it doesn't matter if I was still a U.S. Border Patrol, because we had those same agencies operating here when I was still at the Border Patrol. And it doesn't matter if I'm the sheriff. I'll tell you, having been in both those positions, I'm grateful for what he's done, because it's not only making Texas safer, but it's making all of America safer. So to talk about what tools we have, he's given us almost $4 million for my county for law enforcement, for border security purposes. So we use that to purchase new vehicles, any type of equipment we need, whether it's, long arms, maybe a computer on the desk, night vision. I've purchased both MVGs and thermal cameras, new computers for our cars, license plate readers. I mean, we are completely outfitted. So now what we're using most of that money for are overtime for our deputies, and then positions. We've been able to hire 2 new deputies under that Operation Lone Star that can focus on the border. And we've also hired 3 different part-time deputies. So again, those are the things that have benefited my county from Governor Abbott.
Totally impressive. I got to give 3 cheers to him, because he's doing a great job down there under adverse circumstances. And so are you, by the way.
Well, and I like to make the point that this administration has spent more money and more time and more resources fighting Governor Abbott than fighting the actual cartels that are smuggling and taking advantage of people that are trying to cross this border illegally.
There you go. So, another question for you. What is our government, our federal government, doing correctly to stem the tide of illegal immigration?
Well, first and foremost, you look at the men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol, of ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and even TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. And I bring those 3 groups up because I've seen them publicized negatively in the media here recently because of a Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General report that came out, and it laid some of the blame on them. But what they're doing is what we have always done, and at times I still say we, as if I'm still a Border Patrol agent. They're doing what they're being told to do, Bernie.
Yeah.
And the direction they get comes from the White House down to Secretary Mayorkas, who you know personally, and then it's funneled down to CBP, Troy Miller, who I know personally, and then down to Jason Owens and the Border Patrol. So they're doing what they're told to be doing. Are they unhappy doing it? Most certainly. They would rather be sending these people back to their home countries, deporting them. But because of the policies of this administration, people that come to our border and present themselves or cross illegally, they're given what's called a notice to appear. And it's a piece of paper that says, show up to court in this city on this date. And some of those dates are 10 to 12 years out. And I can say that because I've seen them. So we're in 2024, 2034. So those people are going to spend 10 years here. Most of them won't even show up to their immigration court hearing or their asylum hearing. And then if they do, they're going to have so much equity, meaning they may own a house, they're going to have a job, they're going to have kids that have been born in those 10 years. There's not going to be an immigration judge that kicks them out or deports them. So again, not that they're all bad. And I say that because, again, to be in this type of job, and if you have a heart, I've got kids, and to see what we see is, it pulls on your heartstrings. Sure, but we're still patriots, and our job is still to protect this border, and we're going to do it in a compassionate and humane way, which can be done. But again, there's just been too much politics over this last 3.5 years. It has been completely, and I know I used the word earlier, but dismantled. What the government's doing right now, to get back to your question, what they're doing right, about 2 months ago is when they finally started strengthening some of those asylum restrictions. They're actually getting back to some of those restrictions that Trump put in place. Yeah. Why didn't they just keep that going from the get-go? And I can tell you why. It's because we're in election season. We're now less than 20 days away from the election. That they definitely wanted to make it look like they were doing something to garner some favoritism from the American people and the supporters. But it was a little too little, too late, as they say.
Yeah. Well, here's another question in the same vein. What would you like to see our federal government do better to support the reduction of illegal border crossings?
You know what? And that's an easy answer. It gets back to what I mentioned earlier. Border security, keeping bad people and bad things out of our country. And it starts with a strong leader in the White House, regardless of who that is, but a leader saying to the rest of the world, you're not going to come to our country illegally, and if you do, you'll be sent back to your own country. And are we going to stop everybody from that initial thought and trying to come? No. But that sets the tone, and that serves as a deterrent in its own. And then once you send that message, again, getting back to our border basics, securing the border. Those that we catch, you have to have some sort of I'm at a lack of a term, but a consequence. That's the word I was looking for. You can't just give a slap on the wrist. And let me articulate that a little better. So under Title 42, that was brought on under President Trump. And it's because, yes, we had this disease, this bug going around the world, and we wanted to protect not just our frontline personnel, but also our border communities. So we had the ability, once we caught somebody, to send them right back to Mexico, and it didn't matter where they were from. But what we lost during that time was a consequence. So what did we see? We saw our recidivism, which is rate of reapprehension. Those rates went from 4 or 5% back to 24, 25%. And what does that mean? That means we're catching the same person over and over and over until you quit seeing them. And what that means is likely that they finally made it through. Mm. Once we got away from Title 42, and I had been saying it months before we did it. And, of course, we had those in Congress going, oh, my goodness, what are we going to do? But we had to get away from it because we needed to bring back consequences, get back to our Title 8 authority, which we've gotten back to. But if you don't have the policy supporting that authority, we're going to continue to see what we've seen again over the last year and a half since Title 42 went away, and people are going to continue to come because there is lack of consequences.
Wow. You really are an expert on this stuff.
Well, and one part I have to mention too, and what we talk about in the Border Patrol, yes, consequences, but again, more infrastructure along the border, whether that's a fence, and there's different fencing types. There's vehicle barriers, there's pedestrian fences. And yes, that's an impediment. That's meant to deter people. If they still have the will, they can go over it, under it, or through it. Then we have technology, whether that's our night vision cameras or thermal imaging devices, radars that are tied into that equipment to help detect people. And then no matter how much technology or how much infrastructure you have, if you don't have a man or a woman with a badge on their chest to go out and make those apprehensions, all of that other stuff can go by the wayside. So it's that right combination of those three things plus that consequence with it.
Wow. You got a big job, bro.
I'm blessed. And I use that word a lot. And I like to tell people I may be the most blessed person you'll ever meet. Far from perfect, Bernie. But again, I just don't see myself doing anything else. Look, I grew up on the border. This river means something to me. This dirt out here means something to me. And this is I'm where I can honestly say this is God where God wants me.
There you go. Sheriff Thaddeus, the floor is now yours. Talk to the people, say whatever you want.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's we're a few weeks away from one of the most important times in our nation's history, and I truly mean that. Do I feel that if Kamala was voted in, that America would go away? Definitely wouldn't. But I know that the policies we've seen, not just along the border, but in other parts of our everyday life, have really changed. There's no doubt about it. The facts and figures are out there. But what's most important to me is the border. And for years and years, and we've talked about our militaries and how strong military reflects the American way of life and really sets the tone for the rest of the world. But what's changed in the last 3.5 years is border security. And, it's no longer just having a strong military. It's also having a strong border. We have to protect our borders. We have to continue to make sure that we're keeping, again, those bad people and bad things being drugs, the fentanyl. We hadn't even, Bernie, we could talk for days on this stuff, but I hadn't even talked about fentanyl and the American lives we're losing because of the illegal drug fentanyl that's being, the precursors come from China, shipped to Mexico. They're made in some little garage somewhere by some guy off the street who's not even a chemist. So that's why we see those inaccuracies in dosages that if you and I split a pill, I may be fine and it may take your life. Mm-hmm. But point being is, if we wanted to, and I know I got off track a little bit, if we wanted to stop,
it's your turn.
Almost all organized activity outside of this country trying to penetrate, whether it's our borders or whatnot, we could stop that. We have enough intel, information, technology. We're still the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
And if we wanted to, we could. There's just not the political appetite. And why? I don't know. I've been up and testified to Congress and have heard congressmen tell families that have lost loved ones of fentanyl that it is a bad thing, but our country has a desire for, illegal drugs, an appetite for it. Well, we also have an appetite for illegal alien labor. We do. And we could even manage that if we wanted to. But again, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat at that top level. We just haven't had an appetite to solve it. And we're getting to a time and place in this world history that we're going to have to, because there are bad people that want to come to this country, whether they're terrorists, whether they're political activists. A lot of what we've seen going on with these riots and these protests about Israel and whatnot, I can guarantee you some of those people came in our country illegally. Spies are coming in, and then we've seen a lot in the media recently are criminal aliens that are coming to do harm to American citizens. Those four things: terrorists, spies, political activists, and criminal aliens. That's gonna be, we're gonna be paying for that for this last 3.5 years for many, many, many years to come, decades. And I don't just throw that out there. I can say that because in the early 80s, we had what was called the Mariel boat lifts, when Castro put Cubans on boats, emptied their prisons and sent them to America. Cuba wouldn't take them back. Some went to jail, others were released free on the streets of America. And we had to deal with a lot of those people for years to come, a lot of that organized crime that came with it. So what we've seen over the last 3.5 years is going to affect American lives for decades to come.
Sheriff, how can people reach you if they need to? So
just do a Google search, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland. Bernie, I used to despise social media, and I really still do. But when I took over sheriff, I wanted to show first and foremost that my county had a problem. We don't have a crime problem in my county. We really don't. What we have is a border security problem. Secondly, I wanted to show the great work the men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol do here in Terrell County and along the entire U.S.-Mexico border. And they really do a great job. And then thirdly, I wanted to show how we all work together, whether it's me as a sheriff now and my deputies, the U.S. Border Patrol, and then the state assets that Governor Abbott's deployed to the border. And even those that were steady state here, we all work together. Even if the Border Patrol is fully funded, fully manned, there's still going to be people to get through. And that's where that secondary defense comes in at the state and local level. If you go to DPS headquarters, you look on their walls, there's black and white pictures from decades ago of Border Patrol agents and DPS troopers working together. And not just here, every state that's accurate. So to get back You take a Google search, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland. It'll give you access to whether it's Instagram, Facebook,
LinkedIn.
X, LinkedIn, yes, sir. And then even I got a little bit of YouTube videos out there.
There you go.
But Bernie, I want to again offer that extension of having you come out sometime. You make your way to Texas. I'd love to show you my portion of the world and take you to a piece of the border that not many people ever get to see.
I may just have to take you up on that. Well, I tell you what, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland, you are a great American. I want to thank you for coming on the program and enlightening my audience, because you can read the paper all you want to, but hearing it from a border patrol agent and a Texas sheriff with assets on the border, that's about as good as it's going to get. So I just thank you, brother.
Well, Bernie, thank you. And again, I believe God put us each other in each other's paths for a reason. And thank you for your voice and getting your voice out there, and other American patriots as well.
Amen. Well, that's about it for today.
All right.
We're done. Well, that's about it for now. This has been the Loyal Opposition Podcast, produced in association with Fallback Productions and Veterans for America First. Please like, share, and subscribe as we try to grow the channel and protect America's middle class. Be sure to get your copy of my book, Black Values Matter, available as an ebook on Amazon, Audible, and Apple Books. And also, remember, it's okay to disagree. But if we want our country to prosper, we must insist on unity, transparency, and civility for ourselves and for our fellow citizens. Thanks for listening to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. We'll see you next week.